The Fermi Paradox remains one of the greatest mysteries of the universe. The galaxy is well old enough to have been entirely colonized, or at least visited by now. So, Fermi asked, where is everyone? This has led to many proposed solutions to that paradox, ranging from intelligent life simply being very rare, to aliens hiding their existence from us. But there is also another group of solutions that are quite unsettling, and even spooky, to the point that if we ever do find out the reality of the paradox, we may wish we hadn't. My guest today has compiled a list of the proposed solutions to the Fermi Paradox, and we talked specifically about the spookiest ones.
Welcome to Event Horizon with John Michael Godier. In today's episode, John is joined by Dr. Stephen Webb. Dr. Webb is the author of numerous popular science books, including Measuring the Universe, The Cosmological Distance Ladder, as well as If the Universe is Teeming with Aliens, Where is Everybody? 75 Solutions to the Fermi Paradox and the Problem of Extraterrestrial Life. Dr. Webb earned his PhD in Theoretical Particle Physics at the University of Manchester. His many interests include 50s sci-fi, football, cosmology, and astrobiology.
Stephen Webb, welcome to the program. Now, Stephen, there is one area of the solutions to the Fermi Paradox that sort of make you wonder if, or at least makes me wonder if we really want to know the answer. And this is things like machine civilizations that may have once been biological or made by something biological, but just does not interact with us because it does not care about the biological. It only cares about the technological. Therefore, there may be essentially like the Mass Effect game. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it had this concept of Reapers that their whole reason to exist was to convert life to be machines, and then that the reason we don't see it is because they don't want us to know that they're there, and that someday they'll pounce on us. So what are some of the solutions that get into that, the spooky territory that, this galaxy may actually be rather dangerous?
Well, you mentioned danger. There's actually a lot of different types of danger, I think. So there's natural phenomena that pose dangers. Supernovae, gamma ray bursts, and so on. There's just planetary phenomena that pose dangers to civilizations. Are planets climatically stable over sufficient times? We know Earth has undergone various mass extinctions. So there are natural events. And of course, there's the possibility that life itself, or technological life, is self-limiting. And we look at what we're doing to the planet, and you can easily imagine humans posing a threat to the future of humanity. So that's without getting into the dangers possibly posed by extraterrestrial civilizations if they exist. So one possible solution to the Fermi Paradox is that actually technological life, doesn't last very long. We'll find out, won't we, I guess, in the next few decades, whether we have a future.
Do you think we will? What's your gut feeling on the future of the human species? Do you think we will make it and get past this? I have a tendency to say I think we will. I don't think we face any insurmountable problems. Difficult problems, yes, but not insurmountable. What's your view?
I'm with you, and it comes, I think, partly from that early exposure to science fiction. So Asimov's Foundation trilogy, for instance, it's part of my mental background that we will survive and we will get out there. And yes, we will always have difficult problems, but I think we have the capacity to solve them. I hope. So I'm with you. I'm an optimist. But one of the technological paths into the future that we can possibly foresee is the creation of, I think you called it a technological life form or technological non-biological civilization. And that worries many people, this idea of artificial intelligence. If it reaches a level of power and potency and puissance that threatens us, and it has motivations of which we are unaware or don't fully understand, then potentially what we're bringing into being is a threat to ourselves. It's another way that biological life form, in any case, might be self-limiting. We might give rise to children that take our place. It doesn't in itself resolve the Fermi Paradox, because if these very potent organisms, or well, they're not organisms, they're silicon-based, presumably, life forms, if they exist, where are they? It becomes then more difficult, though, because we don't really have a full understanding of what their motivations might be. One of the arguments that Stephen Gillette made in that original article I read is that biological life forms have this almost this inbuilt requirement to breed, to populate more and more of a particular niche. And why would that stop? At the planetary level, wouldn't we want to go out and get out into the galaxy? Whether that sort of motivation would carry over into some sort of machine-based civilization, I don't know. You can imagine, though, a machine-based civilization thinking, well, actually, there's all of this real estate out there. There's all of this time in which a civilization, another machine-based civilization, could have colonized the galaxy. Actually, we'd better claim our stake quickly, and we go and do that. And we get out. We're the first civilization to go out and colonize the galaxy. So if that sort of thinking takes place, that we might be the first, therefore we stake our claim, then maybe, yes, what we find is a wave of colonization that takes place not through biological civilizations, but from these artificial civilizations. So that's quite a worrying thing, isn't it? That actually we might have these berserkers, for instance, from a Fred Saberhagen science fiction story. The machines, essentially, that go out and take over.
Now,
that's a worry.
That's a worry, and one wonders too, is that a solution that everyone is listening but no one is transmitting, and that the civilizations that transmit get destroyed by whatever may silently control the galaxy. So that to me, I think, is the most terrifying one, is that there's something lurking out there, therefore no one says anything.
Yes, and it's been the basis of some interesting stories in recent years, and what a terrifying prospect that is, isn't it? That actually no one is willing to put their head above the parapet.
It's kind of one of the things that Segnin Shklovsky, hard to pronounce his name, advanced, was that if you look for plutonium, and I know you mentioned this in your book, that something that unnatural, sure, it does occur in very minor quantities, maybe in certain situations like natural nuclear reactors, but if you saw plutonium in a star in large amounts, that might be a technosignature, and in fact there actually is a candidate for that, Przybylski star. But it also says, we have advanced nuclear technology enough to where we can populate our star with plutonium. Stay away from us. So you kind of wonder if you could interpret certain things within SETI that says, well, maybe we really should not be proactively contacting anyone, and ban METI, essentially.
Absolutely, and that's an interesting question, isn't it? So we have this idea of SETI, search for extraterrestrial intelligence, but there's also METI, messaging extraterrestrial intelligence, and it again throws up not just technological questions but ethical questions. I mean, who speaks for Earth, who should be responsible for these sorts of signals. And we're reaching the stage, I think, aren't we? We won't be too far off, where individual billionaires actually can decide, well, I'll send a signal. And that worries me, that we have a society where individuals, or we will have soon, where individuals might take it upon themselves to do this.
Or a rogue nation state. If you actually detected something and published it, then a rogue nation state could say, well, we're going to send the first message.
Indeed, yeah. Which I think indicates that we need to think about these things. You could argue about the relative risk or not, but I think it's certainly a question that should be debated and not just left to individuals or the possibility of rogue nation states doing whatever it is that they want to do. So yes, it raises, I think, ethical questions.
Now, the last thing that I want to get to is an idea related to convergent evolution. We see things happening on Earth, evolutionarily speaking. For example, sharks being shaped very similar to dolphins and things like that because of the utility of it to evolving a species seems to be, it produces the same result. Now, presumably this would be the same for any other carbon-based, water-based civilization. So that brings up a question. Another solution to the Fermi Paradox is that what if planets are more likely to be ocean worlds with no land and only aquatic life, where that life could be intelligent, but try mastering fire underwater, or building a car with fins. Now, do you see that as a viable solution, that we just have special circumstances with this planet that has a certain amount of land and a certain amount of ocean, but that probably isn't going to be the case for other exoplanets? What's your view?
Well, we have this large number out there, the large number of planets, and I'm sure that there will be rocky planets out there that are similar to Earth, with a similar ratio of ocean to land. I think what you've raised there is an interesting question about what exactly is it that we're looking for. So you can imagine a water world where there's intelligent life forms, but they're not going to build a radio telescope. They're not going to master fire. They're not going to have technology in the way that we have technology, because they won't have the natural resources available to them. So they will live their lives doing whatever it is that they do to survive on that planet. We're all making our way in the universe in whatever way we can, but they're not going to do what we do. And I think there's a sense in which that search for extraterrestrial intelligence is actually a search for ourselves. We're looking for creatures that are tool makers, that they're social creatures, because if you're going to cross the universe or send a signal across the universe, typically that's going to be the product of a society. They develop high level of technology, they develop a complex grammar in which they can discuss these sorts of questions about the nature of intelligence on other planets. They are intelligent themselves, and I don't see much evidence here on Earth that intelligence is some sort of convergent evolutionary process. I mean, you look at humankind's cousins, the Denisovans and the Neanderthals, high level of intelligence. They had some technological ability. Didn't do them any good. We're looking for creatures that develop science and mathematics. So it's very, very, very specialized what we're looking at when we're looking for extraterrestrial intelligence. I think in some ways we're looking for creatures that are so like ourselves and yet will share nothing with us except prebiotic chemistry. I find that slightly strange, a slightly strange expectation that we have, that we should see those sorts of creatures out there. I'm not saying that we wouldn't see all sorts of weird and wonderful types of life forms out there, but whether they have evolved the ability to disturb the universe in a way that I think that we will in the future, I find it unlikely that we will.
Now, doesn't that give us a clue, though? Animal intelligence here on Earth. There are many different intelligent animals that exist that aren't really all that related to us, such as octopuses. Does that give us an insight? Does their behavior say, well, aliens might be very similar in a certain way, and ultimately, if an alien civilization can build a radio transmitter, then they must, on some level, be fairly like us in some way, right?
Well, I think if you flip it, that yes, I think there would have to be something in common. If we detected a radio signal that was a list of the first few dozen prime numbers, for instance, or some decimal representation of pi, or whatever it happens to be, then I think that in itself would tell us an awful lot. Not just the fact of their existence, but the fact of their interpretation and understanding of the world is rather similar to our own. All of that reading of science fiction when I was young drives me to think that actually if we were to find alien life, it would be alien, it would be different, it would have evolved in response to quite different evolutionary pressures. You mentioned life around a red dwarf, for example. If we found life there, I would bet it would be very, very, very different to life here on Earth. And I would be astounded if we ever got radio signals from a planet orbiting that sort of star. If we did, I think it would tell us something incredibly profound. I think more likely would be that if we detected a signal, we would again face almost that philosophical question of what does that signal mean? What is it that they're trying to say? I think there would be some doubt over whether it actually was a signal. I think there'd be a debate about, is it a signal?
Or was it hoaxed by Earthlings?
Indeed, yeah. Which raises a whole other question. The initial detection of gravitational waves, one of the things that ran through the discoverers' minds was, is this a hoax? Is this malicious? Has someone injected a signal to make us look foolish or just for malicious purposes? So I think if we did find something, actually, there would be intense discussion about what exactly is it that we've found.
And it could be maddening, because if the radio astronomers come and say, we've detected a signal that's unambiguous, and everybody's like, well, what's it say? And they're like, we don't know, it's radar. The aliens have radar. And they're like, well, what else do we know about this civilization? Well, nothing, essentially. And it could be centuries before we glean anything else out about this civilization we've discovered. So it could be maddening.
It would be potentially totally maddening. I mean, they're so far away you can't share a knock-knock joke with them. So you're just reliant on whatever it is that's coming your way, potentially for a long, long time. Now, great if we receive a beacon and then we point our telescopes at the beacon and then we start getting their Encyclopedia Galactica. Tremendous. I suspect that first signal, if we ever were to have it, would be maddening, as you say, rather than enlightening.
Some internal communication between their ships, and we can't decipher it. We have no way to know what it is.
Potentially that, or potentially something like the WOW signal that we mentioned earlier, that we think, was that it? Was it not? What was that?
I kind of expect that, but there is some unambiguous things that we could see.
Yes.
It would be hard, laser communication or something like that. We wouldn't really be able to decipher it, but it really couldn't be produced by nature.
Yes.
Or at least in a certain way, if it happened in a certain way.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't even mentioned optical SETI, which is a whole other approach, and it has its advantages, definitely. Has its disadvantages, narrow beams and so on, but yes, optical SETI. I think we have to just accept that this is a difficult problem and we might not live to see a resolution, but all we can do is, I think, keep on trying, keep on looking, but maybe broadening our search just on the off chance, because it is such a difficult problem. I think we need to, well, A, invest more in it, but B, look perhaps in ways that we haven't thought to look before.
And that's interesting because in this age, as you mentioned earlier, the age of the billionaires funding things, we now have private, well, we've always, at least for the last 25 years, had private individuals doing things like building the Allen telescope array, or giving seed money or whatever, and also with breakthrough listen. So we have this option now where private searches for SETI could become far more common than they already are, and we might be able to look more efficiently and in new ways, such as using the spectrograph to look for CFCs or the vegetative red edge or all these ideas.
Mm-hmm.
But I wanted to bring up one other solution to the Fermi Paradox, and that is that we are early in the game. Maybe it's the opposite of what we discussed, where maybe we're first in this galaxy, and you mentioned that, which would mean that we would sort of be the ancient ones, the definers of the Milky Way galaxy. And if we spread out into it, space is vast, we might never do it, but if we did, we might do things like, to go into science fiction, David Brin, uplifting, where we find these locked in intelligent creatures on worlds that they can't get off of, and we can help them. Say they have a gravity well that's too big for rockets or something like that. What's your view on that? Do you think that we should even do that, or should we just leave things as they are?
You mentioned science fiction, and that the long-term implication, if we are the first, then yes, we need to consider that. But it's actually, I think, a live question, isn't it? Because we will be exploring Mars increasingly in the next few decades. I'm sure there will be missions to the moons of those giant planets. We're not going to find advanced technological civilizations on those objects, but it's possible that we might find life. And I think we have to be very careful right now about the protocols for exploring our immediate neighborhood. Even actually here on Earth, if we were looking for the shadow biosphere, and we might, for instance, go, I don't know, to Antarctica and start deep drilling, reaching places that have been isolated from the rest of the environment for tens of millions of years. I think in all of these situations, actually, it's a real current cause for concern that we don't want to go polluting otherwise pristine environments that might mask a potential signature. We need to be absolutely sure that any life we find out there originated there, and it wasn't brought by us by accident to these places. So I think it's actually more of a current concern than those far off science fictional scenarios that you mentioned. We need to be thinking about it actually right now.
Yeah, especially you mentioned places in Antarctica, like sealed off lakes and things like that have been, isolated for so long that they might be perfect places to look for a shadow biosphere. Now, my last question for you is, there was a paper, a couple of years ago now, I think, that laid out the case that we might not just be alone in this galaxy, and alone as a result of the time in which we live in this galaxy, but we might be utterly alone entirely in the universe permanently. Do you think that's too cynical of a solution to the Fermi Paradox, that we are utterly, absolutely alone always?
Cynical, I wouldn't say. My preferred solution to the paradox would be that we share a universe with beings with whom we can one day communicate. I think that would be tremendously exciting. It would not surprise me, though, if it turns out that we are ultimately, fundamentally alone. It would be somewhat, I think, spooky if we look out to the vastness of the universe and it turns out to be just us. But it would not necessarily surprise me that we are the only conscious, sentient, intelligent beings in the galaxy, or indeed even the universe.
And perhaps that makes it the spookiest solution of all, that we are absolutely alone. Why is that? And I don't think we would ever be able to answer that question.
No, it would be strange. Strange indeed.
1 billion years from now, we would still be asking, why are we alone? All right, Doctor, thank you for joining us today. It's been a fantastic discussion. And when you release the next edition of the book, I hope you'll come back and visit us.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure.
So what do you think the solution to the Fermi Paradox is? Do you think we should be worried? Let us know in the comments below. Next week, we'll delve back into the other solutions to the Fermi Paradox with part 2 of my interview with Stephen Webb. He has compiled over 75 of them. See you then.
John, you haven't told the viewers to subscribe for ages.
Like, subscribe, and share.